which was getting back to normal again today after the latest crippling disputes, and had today nearly 10,000 of the 18,000 laid off last week back at work. Our car industry is perhaps a prime example of the British industrial sickness we hear so much about, with underinvestment, poor labour relations, overmanning. Tonight we've got a film about one British car maker. He's a very senior British Leyland man who put all that behind him and took his skills abroad and went east. Tom Mangold reports on what George Turnbull, a former Leyland director, is up to now. It's a story that reflects the frustrations and the problems of the industry he left behind him.
George Turnbull would like all his friends at British Leyland to know that he is alive and well and making cars in Korea. He is now the Vice President of the motor division of Korea's multi-million-pound Hyundai Corporation, and he's just produced a brand new popular car, making Korea the world's 16th motor manufacturer. If George's new car takes off in the export market, it will drive one more nail into the coffin of the British car industry that George left behind 2 years ago. It was an industry he joined in 1941 as a £2 a week apprentice. A company-sponsored scholarship took him to Birmingham University, after which he returned to the Standard Motor Company. He rose through the ranks to become managing director of the Austin Morris division. Posing proudly with a 2 millionth Mini, Turnbull's grin hid the awareness that British Leyland's greatest potential profit maker was still not making a profit at all. By 1973, the tensions between himself and his chairman, Sir Donald Stokes, had become too great. Behind the public relations smiles, a simmering row over the direction of the management exploded, and Turnbull resigned after 32 years' service.
I had a number of very attractive offers made to me after I left British Leyland. I think probably the one that interested me most was with the Rolls-Royce Aero Engine Company. But frankly, there wasn't any job that I found really exciting. And really, I think that's the main reason that I decided to go to Korea and join Hyundai.
This morning, the former managing director of British Leylands is the guest of honour at his new factory's ceremony of the pig's head. In Britain, it was government rescue plans that were intended to bring good luck to the ailing car industry, but in Korea, this traditional celebration invokes only the spirit of the pig. The farmyard animal is considered lucky to Koreans. In fact, the shop has been operating even before the official opening. Nearly everything at this new factory is ahead of schedule. Even the delivery of £2 million worth of British paint shop equipment was completed on time. Reason enough to celebrate with rice wine and dried fish. The courtesies and compliments are mutual, but it only interrupts production for a few minutes. The body shells are already being sprayed at 25 an hour.
1 year ago, this was a site with absolutely nothing on it. And in 12 months, we built the factory, which you can see around you today.
Could you have done all this, could you have achieved all this if you'd stayed in England?
Well, I think that the time factor of 2 years would be almost impossible to achieve in England.
Even as Turnbull is making his first production cars, they're still unpacking the last of the £35 million worth of equipment, much of it ironically from British Leyland itself, that will be installed in this new plant. At the outset, Turnbull sent a team of specialists round the world to buy the best of everything. Here in the press shop, where they stamp out the body panels, it was the French who were awarded the main press contracts. But British Leyland weighed in with a useful £2 million worth of jigs, dies and press tools. His £5 million press shop is now the most modern in the world. In Coventry, the average antiquated press shop stamps out body panels at about 3 a minute. Here, the production strike rate is doubled simply by using modern equipment and laying it out to today's requirements. A situation which can probably never be reproduced in Britain.
The presses work longer hours, they're very big investment machines, and therefore the trick is always to work them to the maximum that you can.
So why don't we have that in the British automotive industry at home?
The British motor industry it isn't like here in Korea. This is a new one, and we've had the benefit of the latest techniques and the latest equipment, which we've been able to put in right at the beginning. In Britain, a number of the press shops could do with this kind of equipment, and no doubt about that.
And if you'd had those presses at British Leyland, how much could you have knocked off the price of a car?
That's impossible to say, but it would undoubtedly have improved the efficiency of the press shop.
In fact, the whole Pony car factory is, by British standards, something of an industrial miracle. They broke ground here on what was a swamp in January 1975. Within 11 months, all the buildings were up, and just 1 month later, car production began. Now they're making 10 cars a day, but it'll rise shortly to 40 a day. And all this is taking place at a time when most major European manufacturers are losing money or desperately trying to stave off the challenge of the Datsuns and the Toyotas from nearby Japan. For Britain, there's a further blow. A substantial amount of the original investment in the new Hyundai plant came from British banks. The loans were spent on British machinery, but there's an added irony that a successful Pony, backed by British cash, could easily further hurt British car sales at home and overseas. Don't you feel guilty now about offering your talents to a country that may, in the end, further hurt the British motor industry?
No, I didn't really see it that way, because I was quite sure from my discussions with the Hyundai people that if I hadn't joined them, they would go to Japan or they would go to the United States and get that expertise somewhere else. They had made their minds up. They'd made their decision to get into the motor industry in a big way.
And here is what British investment and British brains have produced. This is George's new car, a tough little four-door 1300cc family job. It's been designed by an Italian. Its engine, rear axle and gearbox come from Mitsubishi of Japan, but its brakes, instruments, clutch and steering gear are British. Something of a hybrid at the moment, but eventually it will be 80% locally manufactured. Turnbull wants the Pony's strength to be a major asset. Turnbull's even brought his last new car, the Marina, to Korea to learn from its faults.
When we considered the styling, we thought of all the small features which are so annoying to customers. By our experience, say, in Britain, things like door handles, knobs and things like that. And we decided we would do the best we could to try and make these trouble-free and virtually foolproof, so that we had a design which would be easily put into production, would be reliable and durable, and would give considerable customer appeal and no real annoyance to customers.
Well, why couldn't you do all that with the Marina when you made it?
Well, I think one learns by one's mistakes to a certain extent.
And what about in sort of greater items like bodywork and so on? What are the differences?
The differences really here is I think that we tried very hard, and as you can see, all the door clearances and the boot and the bonnet clearances are very narrow on this car, and customers, particularly in Europe, are very fussy about these things. They see a big gap in the door clearances or the boot clearances. Just give you a comparison here. They would say, well, that looks a high quality job. That's not quite so good because the gap is a bit wider. Now, that's quite well, it's an acceptable situation, I think, so far as British industry is concerned. But if you're getting into the export industry, people want something just that little bit better.
But the Marina was also destined for export. Why couldn't you close the gap on the Marina? Why have you been able to close it here?
Well, the time has passed. You learn from experience.
Before joining Hyundai, Turnbull insisted on recruiting from Britain a small, specialised team of chief engineers to work with him on the project. He promised them a freedom they would never have in the British car industry. Freedom from tradition, from who does what arguments, freedom to try something new and to cut corners.
See, this one definitely doesn't roll as much. So that's got the bigger diameter one. That's right, yeah. That one is much better than these two. So that's the one we'll pick? Yeah, okay.
Peter Slater left Girling Brakes to become chief engineer in charge of product engineering. And Trevor Lacey, formerly with Vauxhall, joined as chief engineer in charge of chassis development. Hyundai bought their brains, and together with Turnbull, they've now had a unique chance in the motor industry to start from scratch and get it right first time.
The testing that we're going through here is about 4 times, we estimate 4 times is worse than the test that a British car goes through.
And why do you test it so much more severely?
Because we aim to produce a car with very high quality, a very strong structure, and it has to be that strong out here, otherwise it just won't last. I'm saying that if you were to bring a UK car out here, it just would not last, no.
What have you had to unlearn since you came over here?
I've unlearned the worry that you have as soon as you have a problem. Right, how am I going to start this problem? Am I going to have to get permission from Joe to do this, or can I get somebody else to do it? Am I going to upset somebody? Am I going to have a downer on my hands? None of those problems at all.
What have you found is the difference working out here with Koreans to working at home?
There are many, many differences.
I think the speed that things get done here actually is, you know, if you've got a problem, they analyse it very well. The engineers are very thorough. They sit there all night if necessary until they've got an answer to that problem. Then they go to the vendor and say we want some changes made. They make some while we wait almost. We bring it back, put it on test the same day.
Yeah.
Which would take a long time in the UK.
Yeah, I can fail parts on test here, and within 1 day I've got new parts.
It's bitterly cold at this time of year in Korea. Exterior temperatures drop to -18 centigrade, and temperatures inside the factory are an incredible 7 degrees below freezing. Hyundai, cutting its costs to the bone, has yet to install proper factory heating. Korean workers earn around £50 a month. There's no union at the Hyundai plant, strikes are unheard of, and the Koreans never complain publicly about the appalling temperatures in which they must work. These are some of the warts on the Pony's rear end. Inside the plant, cooling liquid on the grinding machines freezes and has to be hacked off. The machines are still being installed by 2 British engineers who have no reservations about life on the shop floor at -7. Now, if this were a British factory working at -4,
there'd be nobody here. There'd be nobody working. Yeah. Nobody working at all.
Now, personally, how does the cold affect you?
Oh, God. It comes straight up from the floor. About midday, it's up to my waist. And by the time I'm ready to go home, it's up to here. Can you leave that arc lamp here? It's keeping me warm.
Well, I'll have to talk to the cameraman about that.
Okay.
Another point that strikes the visitor here is that conditions, particularly at this time of the year, with men working inside the plant at temperatures of minus 7 degrees centigrade, are frankly atrocious.
No, I don't consider them so, really. I think by Western standards they would not be acceptable, let's be frank about that, that's true. But the philosophy here in the country is that people put on plenty of clothing and they work hard and they generate some of their own heat, as it were, and continue to work on that kind of basis. When the company has made more money and when the country is richer, the more heat will be put in and conditions will improve. And nobody's ever complained to me about being cold since I've been here.
Turnbull's greatest asset is a trouble-free labour force that works for the corporation and the country without complaint or question. At Hyundai, there are no problems of overmanning, demarcation inefficiency, or even tea break rounds. It is both instructive and frightening to watch a supine labour force at work. But for Turnbull, it means the realisation of a manager's dream, one that could never again be achieved in Britain. Take away the cheap labour factor, and could you still have produced a cheap and successful car here?
I think in the early stages it would have been very difficult because we have relatively low volumes compared with the big companies of the world, and we need the low or relatively low wage rate to really compensate for that. It is very difficult to produce an economy car at the scale that we're aiming at, that's 100,000 units a year, unless you've got relatively low-cost labour. If you've got high-cost labour, it's extremely difficult.
So you couldn't have done it without the cheap labour?
Not really, no.
What do you see, then, as the essential differences between the Korean attitude to car making and the British car attitude to car making?
Well, I think the attitudes to car making it's very much a team effort here. I think that's the main difference. And no Korean engineer or manager wants to have the finger pointed at him and say, he failed, you know, his part of the job, he fell down on that part of the job, so the whole thing has got to go back a month or whatever.
You never had problems of face at British Leyland? People were prepared to lose face?
Well, I don't know. The face is just a question of degree. I think we all are conscious of face, loss of it or otherwise, I think so.
Now, what, given the British situation and all the failings, can we now learn from what you've been able to do here?
You come back to the whole question of the attitudes again. The attitudes have got to change, and I think that there's been so much effort made by trade unions and management to try and get the attitudes, their points of view reconciled, and they have really broadly failed to do this at this point in time, at least. There may be a lot going on, but there's no real evidence of it. I would put this back to I still think the government really should lead on this point, because that's what governments are for. Here it is.
이태리 토리노 모터쇼의 철품 전 세계로부터 찬사를 받은 승용차 포니.
But it's not all a trouble-free romp for the Pony.
That wasn't very long, was it? It was hardly worth the effort.
Even as the British team indulges in the satisfaction of the opening of the tele-ad campaign that announces the launch in Korea, the all-powerful chairman of Hyundai is making a surprise inspection of the car and subsequently announces his displeasure with the Pony's rear seating. He wants changes, and he wants them now.
Here's to success.
Here's the Pony.
Well, he had a look at the seats. He sat in the car really for probably the first time he'd been in the latest model, and he felt that the knee room in the back could be improved a little bit. It's pretty good, but he would like to have another 3 centimetres of knee room. So it really means that we're going to have to rework these cars, take the seats out, put the new seats in, and we'll have to perhaps make 1 or 2 structural alterations so that we can, in fact, push the seats bodily back the 3 centimetres that he wants.
Well, when are you going to do all this? You're virtually in production. You are
well,
in production.
Yes, but we'll have to do it straight away. There's not much option. So
what, this week?
We start tonight. We start now.
How about rear quarters?
That's been done. We've done the notch at the...
So the chairman's instructions throws the British engineers and their Korean directors into an all-night conference during which the seats are redesigned and modifications ordered.
We will do it with your idea.
Yeah. Okay. Sooner we can delete them, the better.
By breakfast time, the men are red-eyed from lack of sleep, but the work is almost finished. It may not be good for industrial democracy, but it's good for Hyundai. What's the difference in management structure that you've introduced here? Because you quit British Leyland on a dispute with the chairman, with Donald Stokes, over the way in which management was being run.
Yes, well, my main difference with Donald Stokes there was just the plain fact of centralisation of management against decentralisation of management. I always thought that with British Leyland, because it was such a complex company and because it had so many plants geographically situated all around the country, that centralised management, however desirable in theory, in practice would fail in the end. And I still think that is a problem with British Leyland, how to try and decentralise as much as possible, to give as much autonomy as possible in the field to the plants, but still to hold the invisible strings which are necessary, really, to coordinate properly in the centre. And that's a trick of management.
You say the plant manager reigns supreme, but we've seen a chairman in action who's 100 times more autocratic than Donald Stokes would ever dare be.
Well, it may be so, but he's the chairman. We don't see him all that often.
But that's centralised management in action, isn't it? Really?
Well,
when he comes down and says, I want a seat change, I want it changed tonight, and I don't care what the modification costs, and you've got men next door poring over drawings even as we speak.
That's the prerogative of the chairman to do those sort of things.
And it's this sort of awareness that has endeared Turnbull to his immediate boss, the president of the Hyundai Motor Division, who also happens to be the chairman's brother.
We think he's very good leader. I don't know why Britain has to lose him.
You think it was a mistake?
For a while.
You think it was a mistake for the British car industry to let him go?
Well, so far, my opinion, I think British government lost. Britain lost quite an asset. Say like brain drainage.
George Turnbull has been career's gain, and he's loving every moment of it. The man who started work at the Standard Motor Company for £2 a week is now earning around £80,000 a year making cars for the Koreans that must inevitably compete with the range of British Leyland cars he left behind. Although at £2,000, the Pony's not that cheap.
But of course, as you say, when we export, we're going to have to give very low prices. And this really means that we're going to have to sacrifice a lot of margin in the export market, so it means we must get the domestic price as high as we can. No doubt about it.
He is unusually a self-made executive, a rare breed in the British car industry and one it can ill afford to lose. It is perhaps a symptom of Coventry's sickness that there is no work for Turnbull at home, but his exile clearly has not disturbed him. In the middle of a Korean winter, the sun still shines on George Turnbull and his new car.
You are my sunshine, my only sunshine. You make me happy when skies gray.
Who, one wonders, is singing at Luton or Linwood or Coventry today?
All things don't take my sunshine away.
We've got most of our practices here right because we started right. In Britain there are deep problems which we've already been into, and there's no doubt the race has got to be won by someone. Well, hopefully perhaps we'll all pass the finishing post together. But that, I think, really is the real message to the British motor industry, if one presumes to give one, is that they've got to get these things put right. Otherwise, the kind of car that's being produced out here, after I've gone home probably, will be back into England, be selling throughout Europe and also into England. And if it hadn't been done here in Korea, it would be done somewhere else. So they really have to face up to the fact they do have to put right the things which are wrong with the industry now.
That was Tom Mangold reporting on George Turnbull, the man who developed the